Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the Colby Cast, your place for community and conversation about pop culture and storytelling. The boys' schedule has been quite full recently, and Caleb is unfortunately a little bit under the weather, but back just in time is the man, the myth, the legend, Luke. How you doing, Luke? Welcome back.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm super duper. Have you missed me? Have you missed the Colby Cast?
Oh yeah, big time.
Well, you had a very successful Memorial Day hockey weekend, and a busy week of getting a little bit of R&R after that. So I'm glad that you were able to take a little bit of time off, but I'm even more glad that you're back. Unfortunately, Caleb's not feeling too good, so he's not here to talk about our subject tonight. But we'll catch him next week. And what is it that we're talking about tonight?
The
We're talking
Acolyte.
about the Acolyte. That's right, the Acolyte. First two episodes have dropped. It's out there for the world to watch and talk about, and we are going to join that conversation. Um, but before we do that, I have to tell you, Luke, that my worst nightmare has come true. Unfortunately, the Edmonton Oilers are in the Stanley Cup final. This is the one thing that we were hoping against, but it has happened, and in a matter of days, those finals start between the Oilers and the Florida Panthers.
If I
How do
have
you
to
see this
watch,
going? Huh?
if I have to watch Vegas win the cup and then Edmonton win the cup the following year, I might have to pick a new sport to watch. Then Kansas City wins the Super Bowl, and then Boston's probably gonna win the NBA Finals this year. I mean, what a terrible time to be a sports fan.
Maybe you should just stop being a sports guy. That's it. That's enough to make you quit sports. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just become like a chess guy or something. Just get really into painting.
I hear tennis is awesome. I actually think tennis is pretty cool. Maybe we should just watch some tennis. Uh,
Pickleball's on the up and up. Maybe we go to pickleball.
oh yes, pickleball. That is the thing. That we should do that. We should start a professional pickleball league. Would you fund that? You
Yeah,
have enough?
yeah. I will be the founder, the owner of the only team, and I will compete.
So, but I'll actually seriously, how do you see the series going? Are we going to have to watch the Oilers lift the cup, or do you think the Panthers are going to beat them?
Um, I have a hard time putting my emotions aside in this because I hate the Oilers as much as I enjoy watching any team. Like any of my favorite teams, my love for them would be as opposite as possible for the Oilers. I hate them. So it's hard for me to just put my bias aside, but I see the Panthers handling them. I don't think that they can handle the Panthers are just so good and they're so mean. I mean, they just beat you up every chance they get. And Edmonton hasn't faced a team that really does that as bad as the Panthers do. Um, but then the other side of me thinks like, is Connor McDavid just going to will his way to a Stanley Cup and then absolutely tarnish the team sport that is hockey?
Well, hearing what you said about your hate for the Oilers really warms my heart because it makes me realize that I have done a good job as a father because I have passed that legacy on. Papa despises the Edmonton Oilers. I despise the Edmonton Oilers. So to see, and I know Caleb feels very much the same way as you do, and we all do. So to see, that legacy just continue is really, as a father, just really warms the heart. It really does, because every sports fan should root as hard against their hated rivals as they do for the team that they love, and that is definitely alive and well in our household. Um, I was talking to a good friend of the show, Leo Grandino, who lives in Florida, uh, runs a fantasy football league, is very involved in fantasy football, and is even doing a podcast for that. And we have a good conversation through Twitter quite frequently. He's a great friend of the show, and he's jumped on the Florida Panthers bandwagon because he is a Florida resident. And the other day, I told him I'm not only on the Florida bandwagon, I am driving the Florida bandwagon because this team, like you said, they need to handle business. I'm rooting so hard for the Panthers to win their first cup, and I want it to be in short order. I need them to take care of business as fast as possible. So, of course, being the sports fan that I am, I'm expecting the Oilers probably to win in seven. You know, realistically, the pessimist in me is just taking that approach. But I agree with you. Florida, the Panthers are an excellent team. I just hope, I was so sure that the Stars were going to handle the Oilers that it gives me a little bit of nerves to see them actually in the finals. So
Yeah, me too. My faith in myself was a little bit shaken after having so much faith in the Stars. I had them going to the Cup final. I thought they were legit, but they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and I guess that's on me. I should have known better.
I think we even talked about it on an episode. We started out it's a couple months ago where we talked about how we wanted Florida and Dallas to face each other in the final. Well, we were half right. So unfortunately, the other half we were really, really, really not right. So at any rate, that's enough. Let's talk about something that makes me happy, and Star Wars makes me happy. So thankfully, we have an a new Star Wars show to talk about. Two episodes dropped of The Acolyte, and I'm super pumped to talk about this for like the next 2 months. I will say right off the bat, just as a courtesy, we're going to go into full spoilers from the beginning on the first two episodes of The Acolyte. They're out now, so if you haven't had a chance to watch them, again, not sure why you're listening to us, but go watch them and come back. If you have, keep pressing forward because we're going to talk about The Acolyte, episodes 1 and 2. So, this is a brand new show. It has brand new characters in a brand new era of Star Wars. I was excited for it going into it. Do you realize that it's been almost 4 years since they announced this show? Did you know it took that long between the announcement and now?
I remember when they announced it was didn't they announce them all at the same time? The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, the Acolyte, and Ahsoka, or they were all around the same time.
You know what? It's been so long. I can't remember what exactly was. I think the Mandalorian preceded all of them, but I'm pretty sure that the other ones uh, all came out very close in time. I think you're remembering that right, as long as I can remember either. So,
I
yeah.
remember being very excited for all of them. I knew because I'm just so smart that the Mandalorian would be my favorite, just because I love Mandalorians and I always have. Um, but I was very interested in what the Acolyte was going to be, just because it's. I mean, I don't even know what an acolyte is, but the word is captivating. Um, so I've been invested ever since.
Me too. Me too, and it's the unknown is what has made me excited about it. Like you said, like what is even an acolyte? And I would have to look up to say. I know it's like a follower, a devoted type of follower. I'm sure there's a way better definition out there, maybe on Merriam-Webster.com or something. But yeah, the unknown is what has been exciting to me. I had the great pleasure to sit down with Frank Mulder and Daz Davies just a few days ago and released an episode, a conversation that we had about getting ready for the Acolyte. So if you haven't had a chance, go check that out. Even if you've watched the Acolyte now, we had a wonderful Star Wars conversation, and we talked a lot about the High Republic. How I said on that episode that I have not been reading the High Republic, just a time type of thing, not because I don't think it's good or whatever, but because I do. I just don't have enough time to read as much as I would want to read. How informed are you of the High Republic era? Uh, because I know there's comic books and there's books out there, and even a video game or two has tied in a little bit. Have you has that hit your radar at all?
Not at all. I know next to nothing, and I thought about like maybe I should put in a little bit more effort into learning about it to prepare. But I kind of wanted to go into it blind. This is the first time since the sequel trilogy that we're going into uncharted territory, at least for me. So I'm excited, and even though it's only 100 years before the events of Revenge of the Sith, um, that's not a long time for Star Wars, but it's still a pretty big time jump.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been actively avoiding almost everything Acolyte for about a month now, and I know that they've really shot out a bunch of promo stuff. So now I feel like I can go back and watch it now, just because I wanted to go in with as few as little information as possible. I guess I should say, just because I wanted to be surprised and ready to ride this roller coaster. So we've got to see the first two episodes. What were your overall thoughts? What did you think, just in general?
Okay, I have an issue with the show, and I want you to take a guess to what my issue to the show is.
Oh my gosh, can you give me a hint?
It's the complaint I have about like every show now.
Writing?
I don't like the writing.
I think you need to spend some time refining your listening skills because the writing in this is not only just fine, but in certain instances it's fantastic. What is your issue with the writing?
It's the whole chicken egg situation. I don't know if the acting bothers me or if the writing makes the acting bother me, but I can't see them as characters. I still see them as actors reading off a script. Just doesn't
Hmm.
it hasn't like I like the plot of the show. I like the premise. I really like the way the Jedi are behaving. It's very new. I can't get my head around the writing.
Okay, this is interesting
I've been
because, like,
watching too much Game of Thrones. That's why. Because I I'm preparing for the House of the Dragon season 2. So I'm watching a show that has tremendous writing. So the bar is high right now.
I'll be interested to see because I have every intention of doing weekly recaps of House of the Dragon season two with you guys because last season I didn't I talked to Ross about every episode of House of the Dragon season one, but this time we're all sort of on the same watching schedule. So my plan is to cover it with you guys coming up. Well, and when there's overlap with the Acolyte, I want to just sort of split the episodes like we did last year with like Mando and Last of Us and Bad Batch and that kind of stuff. I think we were doing three shows in one episode at one point last year, but I can see what you mean if you're watching Game of Thrones, and I don't know that. First of all, I don't. The writing in this is not bad, and one of the things I wanted to do in this in our conversation was sort of like talk a lot about the characters because I think the characters are really cool, really really cool. So maybe we can work through some of your writing issues as we talk about individual characters, but I don't see it. I don't see the issue with the writing, and I think maybe you've gotten in your own head, Luke. I think that's what we need to find a way to get you out of your head.
Hypnosis. Hypnosis. Um, as unsurprising as it is that I have an issue with the writing, it is equally unsurprising that you don't see that I didn't like the writing. Because I don't think we've agreed on any of the stuff that I've had an issue with the writing. Um, but yeah, I like the characters. I really do. I It took me a second to get what they were going for with the super serious Jedi tone. At first, I was sort of like, "Oh, come on!" Like, what's the name of the character? He's the second Jedi we see. He's the one who goes and arrests the main character. I still know their names.
I could not. I could not wait to hear what you have to say about this character. His name is Yord.
Yord.
You're talking.
Yeah,
You're talking about the younger guy who
yeah,
he goes to arrest Osha. Yeah,
yeah.
Yord.
Um, Anakin and Obi-Wan would have stuffed him in a locker. Like, Qui Gon Jinn
I think.
would have given him a
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
noogie, and I didn't like it at first, but by the time the second episode rolled around, I was like, but that's how they're supposed to be. That's the Jedi at that time. Like that's a good character.
Yeah, I agree. And let's just get right into the characters then, since you brought up Yord. Yord, I think he's supposed to elicit those feelings from you, and that's a reflection of good writing and good performance. Like, you want Obi-Wan and Anakin to stuff this guy in a locker. That's exactly how you should feel with this guy, because he starts out as this pretentious, almost like a prima donna, like, look at me, I'm a Jedi Knight now, right? He shows up to arrest Osha, and she's like, oh, you finally made Jedi Knight. Oh, like, in maybe like she's inferring that he had a tough time doing that, and you can tell that she's doing this just to needle him, right? And it works, but he can control his feelings. And then later on in the episode, when they're going to go off on their mission, they go walking in, and he's steaming his Jedi robes. I mean, he's a pretentious prima donna. He wants to look good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
he's a
He's
he's
very
right.
he
It's
tries
great.
really hard to be good at his job. Like he's very proud to be a Jedi Knight.
He is the definition of a Gordy Gohard, right? That's sort of the nickname that we have for hockey players, right? The ones that try a little bit too hard. He's a Gordy Gohard.
He, I think the epitome of it was when they were talking about setting up their little sting operation, and he was like, "Are you sure about this? Giving a civilian a weapon violates 13, whatever, whatever." Like it was that, and shows like this need that, so I get it. Um, doesn't make him a likable character, but I get it. Not every character needs to be a likable character. Um, but we'll see. I think he's sort of just going to end up being a cookie cutter character without a lot of depth, which is fine because there's a lot of characters to unpack already.
You're right, absolutely right. The last thing I'm going to share about Yord, two quick things. Number one, in my notes, like, because you know me, I take notes on this stuff, right? In in the beginning part of my notes, I wrote Yord is the worst, and I underline him just because he's so annoying to me. But then by the end, nearing the end, well, at some point in the second episode, I wrote, "Is Yord the worst? He's coming around." Because, like, he vouched for Osha, he followed her, right, when May was off trying to assassinate the meditating Jedi, Master
Yeah,
Torben.
because he's a
Uh,
hall monitor.
he's a hall monitor. I love it. He is a hall monitor, and it's great. He's perfect. Yeah. So, and then yeah. So, I think you're right about he's he's there, and he's one of many characters that we've already been introduced to. And oh, the last thing I wanted to share is that there's sort of this online presence now that have latched on, that are absolutely in love with Yord, and they're calling themselves the Yord Horde, which I think is amazing. I love that.
He is a bit of a hunk.
Hunka burning love. Well, I didn't expect us to start off with Yord. By the name, his name is Yord Fandar, if anybody is keeping score. Um, I actually wanted to start out by talking about the character that I was most excited to be a part of this show, and that character is played by Carrie Ann Moss. Of course, I had talked about how excited I was about seeing Trinity from the Matrix movies be in Star Wars, and I have a little bit of a rant here for you, Luke, because she sure was in Star Wars. Master Jedi Master Indara, played by Carrie Ann Moss, she was in Star Wars. She was in Star Wars for less than 5 minutes, Luke. Less than 5 minutes. And here's my rant. I have to reference How I Met Your Mother for my rant. Are you ready? Here we go.
Go ahead.
Do you remember in the final season of How I Met Your Mother? The whole season is based on one weekend where there's a wedding, right? Uh, I can't even remember whose wedding it was. Barney and Robin's wedding. Is that right? So
Yes.
at one point, at one point the guests start arriving, and this guy arrives, and his name is Gary Blauman. And the shtick, the running joke through the whole episode is every single time one of the characters sees Gary Blauman walk in, what do they say? They say one of a few things.
I
What's one
love
of the
Gary
things that they say?
Blauman, or I
I
hate Gary
love
Blauman.
Gary Blauman. I hate Gary Blauman. It all has to do, and then they show us a little clip of why someone would love Gary Blauman and why someone would hate Gary Blauman. So you hear those words all the time. I love Gary Blauman. But there's one, is it Barney? I don't know who it was, but somebody says, I hate how much I love Gary Blauman, right? So it's this whole thing. That's how I feel about how they used Carrie Ann Moss in this show. I hate that she's gone. I knew this show was about a murder. I knew this show was about a character going around and murdering Jedi, or at least murdered a Jedi. And I never once thought it would be arguably the biggest star on the show and in the first 5 minutes of the first episode. That to me is so upsetting because I was looking forward to 8 episodes of Jedi Master Trinity. But here's why I love this, because it makes me so nervous for every other character in the show. This is it's telling us right off the bat, you don't know what's going to happen. Expect the unexpected, because if they have the biggest name die in the first 5 minutes, literally I timed it, she was in it less than 5 minutes, and she is the one that gets murdered, that sets the story off on and the plot running. That is so exciting to me. I just hate the fact that it had to be Trinity. So, yes, I hate how much I love Gary Blauman. What did you think about that whole Fandango?
It was a good fight. I like that. Um, I was hoping to see a little bit more of her. I'll be honest. Um, Sort of feels like a underutilization of a potential character, but maybe they'll use her more in flashbacks and all that. I assume we're gonna see more of like why she's gonna kill those four Jedi. Um, but I I see why they did it because it really sets the tone. Like, yeah, we're not messing around. We're not beating around the bush here. Um, so I didn't hate it, but I think that could have been done with a different character, maybe.
Of course, it could be done with anybody, but I think that they're sort of like you said it brings stakes right off the bat. You see a name like Carrie Ann Moss. I mean, she was in Jessica Jones, she's in Matrix movies. She's a big star. So you see her attached. She's out there doing a lot of press for this show, like a lot of press that I tried to avoid because I didn't want to know anything. But I remember seeing her popping up a lot to get the press going for this show. So you expect, like you said, your expectation is that she's going to be a major part of it, and they go right off the bat and be like, okay, no, we're going to subvert some expectations and we're going to kill her in the first 5 minutes. I think that that's a really stark message to send. So would I like to have seen her more? I hadn't thought about what you said. Maybe we will see her in some flashbacks. That would be cool. But at the same time, her death means something. It holds a lot of weight and it brings the stakes. So that's pretty exciting to me. I just think that it's sort of a bummer it had to be with such a great performer, someone I was excited to see. So that's what. There's not much to say about Master and Dara except that yeah, that fight was pretty sick. I mean, both of the actual fights in this show, I think we only got two like real fights. Both of them, it's one of the things, one of the highlights I walked away from was the fight choreography was very different and very cool. Um, what about Master Soul? He's played by Lee Jung Jae, and he was from Skid Game. Did you watch Squid Game when that was on? I can't remember.
I did.
I did not. How did you like it?
It was cool. It was it was really serious. Like there were some parts that were almost a little over the top with how far they took it. But it was a really good show.
Yeah, I never watched it, but I do know that he was in it, and now we have him here playing Master Soul. What did you think about him?
He seemed cool. He seemed the most like a Jedi that we're used to. Um, he was willing to bend the rules a little bit. He was a little bit more of a risk taker. He wasn't as by the book as everybody else was, um, but he was cool. I'm interested to see where he sort of where he lands by the end of the show, because it's clear that he has a lot of empathy for um, May. Is her name?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's clear that he has a lot of empathy for May and a lot of attachment to Osha as well. Um, but I'm not sure. We didn't see a ton of him. I don't think we saw him in a very limited role, in my opinion. Um, so I'm excited to see where it goes from here, because I don't. I think there's a lot more than what we're seeing right now.
I get the sense that you're right. There's a lot about Master Soul that I like very, very much. I'm very intrigued by him. I think that he conveys like this quiet power, like this strength, but he's also very compassionate. He's clearly very committed to his Padawans. You know, we have Osha as his former Padawan, and we have Jeki as his current one. But I get the feeling like that he could be a bit of a maverick, sort of like in the vein of a Qui Gon Jinn, and that's exciting. But I don't know, it's sort of weird because at the same time, I feel like he plays the good soldier too, because many times he followed orders, like, not in an Order 66 type of way, but he was told to do certain things and he did them. Uh, and especially at the end, which we'll get to a little bit, I think, a little bit more, but I think he struck that balance really well. And I find your words interesting because I found myself thinking about them too, being like, there's something else going. I feel like there's something else going on with him. He was clearly a part of a very, very important situation, right? That sort of is the root of this entire story back on the planet that Osha and May are from. So what that's all about, I don't know, but he's a part of it, and she's clearly targeting him too. So we'll get to it in a second when we talk about Master Torben, but I would be surprised if there's something surprising that we get out of Soul. And I think that Lee Jung Jae has the ability to pull off something pretty spectacular. I really enjoyed when he was on the screen. In his scenes, I really really enjoyed that character. It was very cool.
Yeah, I agree. He seems like a very specific kind of character that it's hard to put a pin in, right? Because he's not quite Obi-Wan in his like. No, Obi-Wan's a bad example. He's not Qui-Gon Jinn or Anakin, where he's just gonna go do whatever he wants. But he's also not like super. I'm gonna follow the rules like Mace Windu or that Yord guy. Um, so I think he's probably gonna end up being a fan favorite by the end of the show.
Oh, he's a fan favorite already. People are eating him up, making it known there on the socials, and I'm one of them. I really enjoyed his performance. One of the things I really liked was when Osha told him May is alive, and he was actively telling people that Osha had a twin and she's dead. And even when they were on their way, I think it was in the first episode. I believe it was Jackie and Yord imply like, wait a minute, if she had a twin, could she be a part of this? And at that time, Soul was like, no, she's dead. In his mind, he was convinced she's dead. But then when Osha told him May is alive, he looked right at Osha and said, I believe you. And I loved that. I thought that that was great. And then later on in the second episode, when he was talking to Osha and Osha was trying to convince him to let her go after May, he asked her, he literally said, I couldn't save her. Let me try now. So that's some nobility shining through in this character. And then the last line that I wrote down that I thought was very powerful was when he said, he told Osha to have faith in May and have faith in him. So here he is, like, he's not just trying to catch May to bring in this criminal who's murdered by this time two Jedi. Um, but he seems like he wants to try to save her. He says to have faith in her. And I found that I feel like that adds a layer of complexity that I think is really, really enjoyable to watch and very intriguing as a story point. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else he has to add to this show. Um, so they're his boss, I guess, quote unquote, if you want to say it that way. It was named Master Vernestra Rowe. She's played by Rebecca Henderson, and she is actually a High Republic character. She's in books and comics. Um, and I don't know anything about her, but I know she's pretty popular. She had a small part to play in this show, but did you have any thoughts on her? She was the green Jedi with no hair that was hanging out on Coruscant.
I got the vibe that I don't trust her. I don't know if I was just looking too deep into it, um, but she
Interesting.
seemed a little eager to be like, okay, yeah, go do what you want. Um, or like a little too accepting of like, oh, she has a twin and she's the one who's doing it. Cool, go ahead, do whatever you want. But maybe I was reading into it a little bit too much.
I didn't quite catch that, but what I did catch was she seemed very. I don't know anything about her, so and I do know that there's some backstory on the character. So if I'm reading this wrong, this is just my thoughts on what we saw. I feel like she's worried about appearances, about how the Jedi is perceived, because she said, in the beginning when she first approaches Master Soul, when he's there with those younglings, how jarring was it to see younglings in the Jedi Temple? By the way, for me, it was jarring.
Um, I'm gonna bring up my girlfriend twice because I was watching it with her today. First time was she was just on her phone because she doesn't know any of this, and she looks up when she sees the younglings and she goes, "Oh, are those the ones that die?" And I said, "No."
You said no.
Yeah, I said, "No, not." I said, "Well, this is 100 years before, so I'm sure a lot of them just die like of old age or along the way. But no, those aren't the ones you see that die."
So technically, she's right because those those Padawans or those younglings, they do die, but not the way that is very famous. So, um, anyway, so yeah, so when she approaches him and she's just like, "Look, if our enemies, if our political enemies catch on that someone's running around murdering Jedi, someone that is Force sensitive, trained in the Force in some way, is murdering Jedi, she's like, this is a bad thing, and you have to go. Let's keep it. Let's keep it quiet, and let's take care of this quickly. That to me, like, is a foreshadowing of the Jedi bureaucracy that ends up sort of being the downfall of the Jedi Order, right? Like, I don't know if this is there for that reason, but to me, that's the line of thought. And then, like, if you fast forward to the end of the second episode, Soul knows where May is going because they know that she's targeting Kelnaka. Uh, but Vernestra Rowe is just like, no, we need to have a small council. We need to talk about this. We need to strategize. And I was just like, instead of action, bro, you want to talk? Like, come on. This is one of the problems that turns into a larger problem. So, but we mentioned Master Torben, I believe his name is, the one that was meditating and hadn't spoken in 10 years. What was your take on that whole thing?
I liked it. It was cool. It was different. I've never seen something like that, and I was a fan.
Did you realize that he was surrounded by a force field?
Nice.
I've been waiting to say that for days. as as May was trying to attack him and she just keeps on bouncing off of the air basically, I was just like, oh cool, he's got a force field. He's
I was
literally protected by the force.
I'm a little confused about the logistics of it. I'm sure somebody can enlighten us. But like, so is that guy just in a constant state of meditation?
Maybe medication too, yeah,
Maybe
it's possible.
medication.
I looked into something that they mentioned because I believe it was May that said these words that he had taken the Barash vow, and I had to look at that. I didn't know what that was, although I had read a comic that mentioned it. It was actually the first mention of the Barash vow. Was in 2017 in the Darth Vader series, the number two, three, and four, it's mentioned because Vader goes off and has to go find a Jedi who has taken the Barash vow. And the Barash vow basically is a Jedi who vows to go basically remove him or herself from daily life and commune with the Force all the time. That's all they do is commune with the Force. And there's different reasons to take it. Um, and it's called the Barash vow because Barash was the first Jedi to do this. But she basically just withdrew herself and communed with the Force all the time. And I guess it appeared in some High Republic books as well. But I thought it was a cool like nod to those publications, because it's not something we've seen on screen. And I like the concept. It's a cool concept. Why wouldn't Jedi do something like that where they're just trying to commune with the Force? Well, this guy, he did it for a long time because apparently he hadn't talked to anybody for 10 years. And Soul, he was pretty sure that he was going to talk to him, but he never had a chance. I thought that was pretty interesting how that whole thing went down. How she got him out of that state of meditation and actually got him to say the words something to the effect of "we thought we were doing the right thing," almost like he knows that they've done something wrong, but we just don't know what that is. What's your take on all that?
That was my favorite part of the first two episodes, when he just accepted his fate, accepted his punishment almost, and just drank the poison and went peacefully. Um, because when he was in his little little force field, I was thinking like, okay, well, if he's just gonna stay like that forever, then you know, do we just move on? But I think it added a lot of depth and reasoning as to why May did what she did, and it made me really excited to see the flashbacks of what happened and why this is happening now.
We keep on talking about May, and I feel like we're just sort of going and like we're sort of avoiding like getting into the details because there's a lot of details about May. But before we get into the whole twin aspect with Osha and May, I just wanted to get your thoughts. Number one on Jecki. She's played by Daphne Keene. She's the Padawan for Master Soul, as well as Kelnaka, who is the Wookiee Jedi. Uh, I I didn't know what to expect with Jackie because there's not much to go on, and of course, I was sort of like avoiding things actively. But number one, she's played by the actress who played X-23 in Logan. Did you know that? Do you know that that was her?
I knew that that actress was going to be playing a character. I just didn't know who. I'm a little disappointed that they covered her in paint.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. I'm not sure why they had to do that because she would have been able to pull off a great performance
Her
without it. But
facial expressions in Logan were just so like impressive.
maybe we'll see that. I don't know. They cast her for a reason. I really like Jecki. I really like Jecki. I feel I get a little bit of a young Obi-Wan vibe from her. Like she tries to be very proper. She wants to do well by her teacher, her mentor, but at the same time she has opinions and she wants to state them. And she started out by saying like permission to speak freely, and then Master Soul is just like, you can stop asking that. Just say what's on your mind. But she has really good things to contribute. I thought she was a very effective character throughout both episodes. I like the fact what I was afraid of was that they were going to make sort of like this contrived rivalry between Osha and her, but they didn't. Like right off the bat, Osha is just like, "Hey, why don't you try to, repolarize the power couplings?" And I was thinking like, "Oh, Jackie's going to come in and be like, "No, this is the no." She tried it and it worked, and she immediately was like, "Oh, it seemed like they were cool with each other." So I liked that. I liked that she came up with the plan to send Osha in as May, and uh, Soul immediate said, "That's a good plan," and it was sort of at the expense of Yord's plan when he was saying, He was that's when he was saying the that violates all these things and whatever. And she also is not afraid to speak her mind with Yord. Like she just looks at when he was steaming his robes. What did she say to him? She's just like, put your clothes on, Yord. So she is not starstruck by a Jedi Knight. She's ready to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else we get from Jecki.
Yeah, she was cool. It was a smaller capacity, so we didn't get to see much, but I liked what we saw.
How about Kelnaka? So he's played by the same guy that played Chewbacca in Solo, as well as the prequel. I'm sorry, the sequel movies. And he's just this loner Jedi who, in my opinion, he lives in like the Star Wars version of Shrek's swamp. Right? He just wants to be left alone. He's out there, no one around him. He even has a sign. I don't know what that sign says, but in my mind, it says "keep out," like stay away. I love the idea of seeing what a Jedi Wookiee can do, fully realized, because we got a little bit of that with Gunji, right, in the Clone Wars, as
My
well
man,
as Bad Batch.
Gunji.
Yeah, your guy Gunji. But now this is a fully realized live action um, Wookiee Jedi who we already saw use the Force. He has the strength of a Wookiee because he just broke that blaster in two. We didn't get much of him, but I'm sure we're going to get more. What did you think? What do you think about the concept, and what do you think about what we saw of him?
Um, he was cool. I really like the idea of a Wookiee Jedi. I'm excited to see a little bit more of him. Another example of bad writing. Those extras, whoever those guys were, that were in his quote unquote swamp, that was just bad. Those guys were. It was so eye rolling. Those guys being like, whatever their dialogue was, it just became like adults talking in Charlie Brown to me because it was bad. I didn't like it. Well, but yeah, I like the guy, the Wookiee.
They were speaking Huttese. They weren't even speaking English. How can you critique
I thought
writing
about
in a
that.
Star Wars made up
No, I
language?
thought about that because I literally thought I'm reading the words, I don't like what I'm reading, and even the way you're speaking it doesn't sound like you know what you're saying. That sounded like you
You-
were reading off a script, in my opinion. Disney, you're a $1 trillion company. Be better.
You are worrying about two throwaway extras that are in a show for 30 seconds that are speaking Huttese. You're
Yeah,
critiquing their performance.
yeah.
Okay. All right. You have every right to do
You're a
so.
$1 trillion company. Be better than that.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I cannot wait to see what else you decide to hone in on here in the next 2 months to see what other characters are speaking like um what's the language like Gungan. That was not an authentic Gunganese accent.
I mean, I just see so many people on the internet or like when we went to Star Wars Celebration. These people really commit to it. People learn like Elvish and all these other like made up languages. And
It's a valid
it
point.
sounds
That is a valid
fluent.
point.
That did not sound fluent. But I digress. Just be
I
better,
love it.
Disney.
I love it. Let's talk about the twins, because here we have another set of twins in Star Wars, and we're talking about Osha and May. I'm not going to say what I have to say yet about the characters because I want to hear what you have to say because you're critical of extras speaking Huttese. So hit me with your takes on Osha and May and the whole twin aspect of things.
Um, I like OSHA a lot. I think OSHA's really cool. I don't like May. I don't. I don't know if it's like a she's bad right now and she's gonna be good. So that conflict inside of her is what's frustrating to me. But it was just sort of like her first line. She said the line twice, and both times it made me want to bang my head against the wall till my brain fell out of my ears. Um, Attack me with
Oh yeah,
all
she
your
said
strength.
attack. Yeah, attacking with all these. Yeah, I was going to bring up that she that she said the very same thing to both Jedi
I
when she was
think
there to kill.
it's for a purpose, but it still was just like I didn't like it. It hit my ear weird. Um, but she's
I will agree with you. Actually, I will agree with you when the very first thing we heard when she was approaching Master Andara was that, and she sort of struck her pose. I was like, "Oh, this is a little clunky."
yeah,
I will actually agree with you there.
that was almost a criticism by you. Good job. Um, yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I don't know. She's very clearly like down the wrong path, but that's not the frustration I have with her. I feel like Anakin in episode two slash the beginning of three is the perfect level of conflicted, where it's not like where it is with May, I think, where it's like you're trying a little too hard to convince everybody else so that you can convince yourself. Um, that's the sort of vibe I got from her, where it was like it didn't feel hateful yet. Um, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I don't know, I like my villains. I like my villains complicated, and I like them evil. And you're gonna be bad, you know.
I see what you're saying, and I see how that's fitting into May as a character because she is still trying to impress this master who she doesn't even know his identity, right? The guy that we saw at the end of the first episode, who we will get into here in a couple seconds. But I see what you're saying because May is not a fully fleshed out villain. She's angry. She's sort of unhinged. She's out for revenge. She's literally at the center of everything that we know, but we know so little so far that the same can be said for May because we don't know. We know what her motivation is, but we don't know the details that they've decided to hold back that they're going to be revealing. I thought it was really interesting that she thought that Osha was dead because we saw Osha having these visions, sort of like, that she saw this little girl multiple times, and in my mind, I'm just like, oh, this is May doing that. This is May behind the scenes doing stuff. But then we find out near the end of the second episode that May thought Osha was dead. So she was surprised when she saw Osha. And you saw her change, like her demeanor changed when she saw Osha. She called her Oshi, like back when a nickname I would imagine that she had when they were little. But going back to like the whole master dynamic, her scenes with Kamir, the apothecary guy, the guy that gave her the poison, they clearly are trying to impress this master. They keep on referring to the fact that she needs to kill one of these Jedi without a weapon. I don't know what that's about, but they make a point of saying something about it like two or three times in the episode. So it's almost like she's having to prove herself to this dark figure with the red lightsaber. We don't know who he is, we don't know what he's about, but clearly he's powerful and he's pulling some strings. So what that turns into, I don't know, but I just wonder if that's sort of working on her decision making because she's not only out for revenge, but she's trying to prove herself to this greater power. And that's, I think, a difficult thing for somebody. You're not going to be fully evil if you're trying to prove yourself to a teacher. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agreed with you. I was surprised. I thought that she was going to be like trying to turn her sister, and that's why she was having those visions. Um, so I think that's a very interesting part. Like it's an interesting twist, right? Because they were both sort of blind to what was happening, and I think that that adds a very different dynamic. Um, but yeah, I agree. She definitely isn't evil, you know. Um, but it's sort of like you're really going to go seek revenge for yourself, but you're not really doing it for yourself. You're doing it to impress somebody. Like if it was just like go kill four Jedi, I would have been like, okay, cool. You're very committed to impressing this person. But it seemed like she was doing it for herself, but then she also had to do it to impress the guy. So I didn't know. I was kind of I was confused.
Yeah, it's a confusing thing. It's like you said, she's not just out there. Oh, I want to take revenge on these four Jedi because of this. She's doing it almost like like an audition or a tryout for uh, a place on this guy's team, right? So, and she even has to do it in a certain way. So but I'm sure it all has a reason. Um, But let's talk about the other twin in the twin situation with Osha. You mentioned that you liked what you saw with this character, that you liked her as a character. I agree with you. I think Amanda Stenberg is a star. Like, usually when you have one person playing two roles, you're like, oh, there's one person playing two roles. But I really felt like she was embodying these two different characters very, very well.
I agree. So for the second time, I'll bring up my girlfriend. She watched the first scene, which is May killing Neo's
Trinity.
girlfriend. Yeah, Trinity. Um, and then the next scene, it shows Oshi, right?
Yeah, Osha.
I like saying Oshi. It sounds like
Yeah, because his hockey player TJ Oshie.
I didn't even think about him. I was thinking Yoshi, but yeah. Um, she looks at the TV and goes, "She doesn't look like she would do that. She doesn't look like a bad guy." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess you're right. She doesn't look like a bad guy." And it's impressive that she can portray two different characters so well, because they almost looked different.
I agree with you there, and it's her facial expression. It's just like Osha has a different face through expressions than May does. May has an angry face, an angry look on her face. Osha doesn't. Osha, she's hanging out with her cool little pip droid. I don't even know what a pip droid is, but I want a pip
I
droid.
like it.
That guy's cool. Come on, Disney. We know that's a toy waiting to happen. Hurry up, because that guy does everything.
There are a
It's like a
billion of
smartphone.
those sitting in some factory in China. Just ship them out. We're ready for it.
Ready to go. Where is the pre-order? I need and the Funko Pop. Love Pip. Uh, but Osha also, she conveys the strength, like almost like a ferocity when she needs it, but she's also kind. She helped out that guy with the parasite on his mouth. I thought that was a super cool scene. That whole escape. Um, I have to tell you that I was a little bit surprised when she shot not once but twice at May. I don't. I know that she had mentioned that she blamed May for killing her family, but I was sort of drawn. I was a little surprised when she not only did she point the blaster at her, but she shot it and then she shot it again. So she definitely has no love for May, or at least it seems that way. So maybe there's a little bit more to Osha.
I was sort of confused about that because I felt like she like those sort of felt like warning shots to me. I thought you weren't a Jedi, but you were well on your way. You don't miss those shots, do you?
I thought the same thing. Like, did she miss on purpose? So that makes me wonder: is she doing that for an appearance, for appearances? Like, she wants people to think that she was shooting at her.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I'm telling you, killing Indara in the first 5 minutes has got my brain just doing flip flops. Like, I don't really know what to expect from anybody on this show, and I think that's a really good feeling.
I hope that we don't do what we did with Moon Knight, which was look for like keep looking for something that isn't there. Um, I hope they just give it to us. You don't have to spoon feed it to us, but just give it to us. You know,
That's a good comparison, yeah, because Moon Knight started out to be one thing and it turned into another thing. And I enjoyed Moon Knight from the beginning to end; it was cool,
it's
but
aged well.
it has aged well. I'd like to see. I was just talking to my coworker about this. The coworker that I have that's a big Marvel fan. I want to see more Moon Knight. um, well, let's end. There's two last points. I did want to talk a little bit about the story, but we can talk about the story in further in future episodes because I've really enjoyed our discussion just based on characters alone. Because the characters I feel like are very strong in this show. But there's sort of this angle with the twins that I'm really fascinated by, and it was some dialogue that was being spoken when when Osha had her first vision. They were on Karlak, and she was in the crashed ship, and the little girl appeared to her for the first time, which was really freaky to me. I guess like I have PTSD with The Shining and those two twins that like are just terrifying.
I did sort of expect her to just like snip somebody's Achilles. Um,
Yes.
she did give a little serial killer vibe.
That was very jarring to me. But there's some dialogue that goes on while Osha is chasing after young May, and it's when they turn into well, that's when Osha turns into young Osha, and the two younger versions of themselves are talking. Uh, they say, I don't remember who says what, but basically the two of them together say, "You're with me, I'm with you, always one, but born as two." Oh, actually, May says that, and then continues and says, "As above sits the stars, and below lies the sea. I give you you." And then Osha finishes and says, "And you give me me." So the first line is what I like sort of keyed into is when it says, "You're with me and I'm with you, always one, but born as two." That to me suggests more than just twins, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Like
it.
always one, but born as two. What does that mean?
And they mentioned um, the whole family died, the moms and the sisters, and I
Yep.
thought like, so does that mean that she was raised like as a community, or what? I didn't know like how to read into that. Um, I was like half thinking like, did they were they on their own when they were younger and sort of had to build that connection together for a survival point? But there's definitely something else going on there. Then my brain went to, so they're both force sensitive, and we know that metachlorians are what control the strength of the force. So,
That's right.
and siblings don't always share the same metachlorian count or even metachlorians at all, right? So it's
Sure.
really interesting that they would both be twins and both be force sensitive.
I think that there is definitely something going on like what you're talking about. And when they talked about I don't remember who said it, but they mentioned that Osha lost her mother's plural and her sister. I actually sort of flashed into like Night Sister territory because is it like that kind I'm not saying that they're Night Sisters, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. But like
right.
the
But is it
tribe
that
mother.
kind of society,
Yeah.
right? So it's a matriarchal society. I think we will find out because like there's literally characters on the poster and the key art that's all over social media for this show that have not even been we haven't seen in the show yet. There's some like one major character that was in the trailer that I believe is going to tie into that aspect of things. So we're gonna see when we get that. I don't know, but hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think that that aspect of the story is really very, very intriguing to me. I can't wait to find out more about that. Um, Last thing I wanted to bring up was the stranger, of course, because how could we talk about the show and not talk about that scene? So at the end of the first episode, we see May walking along a rocky shore of this ocean, and in the distance, well, we hear a voice start to speak, and then in the distance, we see this dark figure who sort of looks to the side and ignites a red lightsaber. And I was really fascinated by what he said. And he said in this, I thought was a very cool, like robotic type of voice, but not all robot. He said, "The Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them. But an acolyte kills without a weapon." There is another reference to killing without a weapon. And then the last thing he says is, "An acolyte kills the dream." That gave me like Captain America Civil War vibes right there. Like Zemo knew he couldn't beat the Avengers, but he could destroy the Avengers by turning them against each other, or finding a commonality that's going to hurt them more than physically, but their spirit, kill an idea, kill the dream. That is that's a powerful place to start. That's a lot of information right there. So I remember watching that scene for the first time and being like, and it immediately and very abruptly ends that first episode, and I was like, whoa, 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 what just happened? What was that? Even the couple other times that I've watched it since then, it's that I was very, very intrigued, very enthralled by it. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm interested to see, what's his end game, because clearly he wants the Jedi and he has an issue with the Jedi Order. Um, but what's the end game? Is it to destroy the Jedi Order? Does he tie into the rise of the Empire? Are we gonna see a somehow Palpatine returned? What's going on?
I think that line was even dropped. I can't remember
Somehow
who said
Palpatine
it.
returned.
No, they somebody said somehow she returned. I think they were talking about May, and I had to giggle a little bit because I think it was there on purpose. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for the show. I think it's a very strong start. Aside from your issues with the writing, I like the fact that you liked a lot about it, because I like it when people like things. I just I like things because I like things, and I like it when people like things. But of course, there's always room for criticism, like clunky dialogue. Uh, which I don't think there was much of. But at any rate, I digress. I digress. Were there any final thoughts? Anything else that you wanted to talk about before we sign off?
Um, I really liked the the tone of the show. Like it did not feel connected to anything else, and I liked that. I was worried that it was going to be kind of hard to nail that there was a difference between where they are at that point and what else we have seen in Star Wars. And it didn't really feel like too much we had seen before, but it was also familiar enough where it wasn't super distant. So I think they got the tone pretty spot on.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I feel the same way, especially not knowing anything about the High Republic. I found that to be actually quite refreshing. And when I'm recommending this show to people who may not necessarily be, into Star Wars in a level that we're into Star Wars, like coworkers, for example, I felt so good walking up to them and being like, check out this show. It's 100 years before anything happened in Star Wars. You don't need to know any of that, just check it out and see what you think. And that's a nice feeling to be able to go up, and maybe this could be an entry point for somebody who previously was intimidated by it, not knowing where to go, what to do. I don't know anything, so I'm not going to do this. You don't need to know anything. Go check it out. So that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good point.
The other thing that I wanted to mention just real quick was the music. I thought the music was so good. I wrote down the gentleman's name. I believe his name is Michael Albers, is the composer, and I felt like he did a really, really tremendous job. He found a balance between sort of new takes on some orchestral type of music that we're used to with Star Wars. There's one theme that came up a couple times that reminded me so much of Attack of the Clones. The first scene in Attack of the Clones, when Padme is arriving and there's an assassination attempt, there's this sort of like a mysterious, wandering type of whimsical but haunting theme that John Williams came up with. And there was another one during the Acolyte that he played a couple different times, and I just was eating that up. I just loved it. But then when you switched over to like the fighting scenes, it got more like based on percussion and a little bit more aggressive, not quite as whimsical. And I was just, that was one thing I walked away from through both episodes. Each time I've watched them, was the music. I want to be able to listen to it already. So drop it on the streaming services, please. hurry up and do that. So anyway, shout out to him. He did a magnificent job. Looking forward to seeing what else he has in store for us. So, all right, awesome. Well, this has been a good start to the Acolyte. I can't wait to talk about this on a weekly basis. Last chance. Anything else? Okay, very cool. Well, then, for Luke, this is Colby reminding you that when it comes to the Acolyte, I have a really good feeling about this. Thanks for listening. You can find the Colbycast on Twitter and Instagram at the Colbycast. If you're wordy, like me, you can send an email to thecolbycast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on your favorite podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is not endorsed by anyone or anything for that matter. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Colbycast unless otherwise indicated.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.